The sky had never looked like that before. A shade of gray so unnatural it seemed to choke the sun itself. Birds circled nervously, their cries sharp and frantic, slicing through the early morning calm. Marcus stood on the hill overlooking the valley, feeling the wind tug at his coat, unaware that the world he knew was about to shatter. He had been 12 when he first learned about courage. Not the stories in books or the heroic tales from his grandfather. Real courage, he realized, was silent, born in the heartbeat that races when everything familiar disappears. And now, at 23, that lesson would be tested in ways no human could imagine. The first attack came without warning. Shadows of enormous shapes darkened the landscape. They moved with an intelligence that chilled Marcus to the bone. The ground shook as the creatures, towering and alien, descended on the valley, their voices a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through bones and hearts alike. Marcus's village, a cluster of stone houses and fields that had known centuries of human toil, became a theater of chaos in minutes. Smoke curled into the sky, mingling with the strange gray clouds above. Marcus ran. He ran through alleys filled with the screams of neighbors, the heat of burning homes searing his skin. He carried nothing but a small leather satchel, his mother's gift filled with maps and journals and a silent promise that he would survive. Every step forward was a defiance of fear, and yet, the memory of his friend's terrified eyes haunted him, sharpening a grief he could not escape. He stumbled into the woods at the edge of the village, branches clawing at his face and arms. Behind him, the creatures tore through the village as if it were paper, their movements precise, calculated, unfeeling. Marcus's lungs burned, but his mind remained strangely calm. Survival, he realized, was not just about running, it was about thinking, adapting, and understanding the world that had become alien overnight. He found a hidden cave, a shallow hollow carved into the hillside. It smelled of damp earth and forgotten things, yet it offered the safety he desperately needed. He collapsed inside, heart hammering, knees shaking, eyes brimming with tears he refused to let fall. For hours he listened to the destruction outside, counting the moments, trying to memorize every sound, every footstep of those creatures. Knowledge, he decided, would be his weapon. If he survived this, he would learn their ways. He would fight back. One day, when night fell, the forest was eerily quiet, almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. Marcus sat by the entrance of his hiding place, staring at the stars that still shimmered defiantly in the sky. He whispered the names of those he had loved, friends, family, neighbors, letting their memory fill him with warmth, even as the world burned around him. He promised them silently that he would not just survive. He would avenge them. He would lead humanity's stand against these invaders. Sleep, when it came, was restless. His dreams were filled with fire and shadow, screams and silence, the faces of the fallen merging with visions of creatures towering over him. Yet within that nightmare a spark burned, a spark of determination that no alien force could extinguish. Marcus realized in the darkness that he had survived the first attack not by chance but by choice, a choice to live, to endure, and to fight back. By dawn, Marcus emerged from the cave. The village was gone, a smoldering memory etched into the landscape. Yet something remarkable caught his eye. A small sprout of green, stubborn and defiant, pushing through the ash. Humanity, he thought, was not so different. Fragile, yes. Vulnerable, yes. But capable of astonishing resilience. Marcus clenched his fists, the weight of grief heavy but steady in his chest. He knew the road ahead would be unforgiving. The creatures would return. But now he had a purpose, a mission that went beyond survival. He would gather those who remained. He would study, train, and prepare. And when the time came, humanity would strike back. Not just to reclaim what was lost, but to remind the universe that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit endures. The first attack had come. Marcus had survived, and in his heart a fire had been lit, one that would guide him toward the final retaliation. Marcus walked through the valley as dawn broke, a pale light spilling over the ruins of the world he had once known. The village was gone, nothing but ash and shattered timber. Smoke still curled in lazy spirals from the remains of homes, and the smell of scorched earth clung to his clothes. Silence lay over the land, heavy and uneasy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Every step he took was measured, cautious. The ground beneath his boots was littered with fragments of lives, broken tools, fragments of cloth, even a child's toy half buried in ash. His heart clenched at each discovery, But he forced himself to keep moving. The pain of loss was sharp, but survival demanded focus. He had learned that the first day of catastrophe separated those who endured from those who did not. Hours passed, and Marcus discovered the first signs of life. A few ragged survivors scavenging through the ruins, faces pale and haunted. They froze when they saw him, fear flickering in their eyes. Marcus raised his hand slowly, speaking in a calm voice. "I'm not here to hurt you. There are more like us. We can survive if we stay together." He introduced himself simply. Marcus. A human name, fragile yet strong, carrying the memory of home. Slowly they began to trust him, drawn by his calm determination. There was Alara, a young woman with a fire in her eyes that refused to be extinguished. Tom, a burly farmer whose hands were still scarred from work. And little Soren, no more than 10, who had survived alone after losing his family. Together they formed the first thread of a fragile human network, a thread that Marcus hoped could grow into something unbreakable. At night, around a fire in the hollow of a ruined stone church, Marcus listened to their stories. Each tale was a wound, raw and bleeding. The screams of neighbors, the alien shadows that moved with inhuman precision, the helplessness of being powerless. Yet beneath the grief, Marcus sensed a spark. Every survivor had that same spark he carried, an instinctive refusal to surrender, an ember of human resilience that could not be snuffed. Marcus spoke to them of survival, not just of hiding but of learning, of adaptation. "We have lost our homes, yes," he said, voice steady, "but not our minds, not our courage. These creatures may be stronger, faster, smarter, but they cannot dream, they cannot hope. That is our strength. That is what makes us human." They listened because they had no other guide, and slowly trust grew into camaraderie. Marcus led them to abandoned stores and fields untouched by fire, teaching them to scavenge and ration. He showed them how to make simple traps for small game, how to purify water, and how to move silently in a world that now belonged to the invaders. Each skill became a lifeline, each day a testament to human ingenuity, but survival came with a heavy weight. Every night Marcus wrestled with guilt, with memories of those he had failed to save. Faces haunted him in dreams, their voices calling out from the ashes. He pressed forward, silent and determined, but the burden of leadership grew heavier with each passing day. He realized that to survive was not enough. To endure meant to carry the pain of loss while keeping hope alive for those who remained. Weeks passed. Marcus and the small band of survivors discovered other scattered humans hiding in forests, caves, and ruins. Slowly, a fragile community emerged, bound not by walls or weapons but by shared determination. And in those nights around fires, Marcus began to teach another lesson. The necessity of courage, the value of knowledge, and the belief that one day, humans could strike back. Alara approached him one evening, eyes glinting with both fear and hope. "Marcus, do you really think we can fight them?" she asked. Her voice trembled, carrying the weight of every loss she had endured. Marcus looked into the fire, watching it dance, then met her gaze. "We have to," he said simply. "We may be broken, but we are not defeated. Every moment we survive, every lesson we learn brings us closer to the day we take our world back." As the fire crackled, Marcus felt the first real stirring of purpose beyond survival. The burden of being the one who endured the first attack was heavy, but it was not his alone. It was the burden of all humans who had faced the impossible and refused to fall. In that moment, Marcus realized something profound. Survival was not just an act, it was the beginning of a promise, a vow that humanity would not vanish quietly into the night. And so, under the gray dawn, amid the ruin of a world claimed by invaders, Marcus carried not only himself but the fragile hope of humankind. He had survived the first attack, yes, but more importantly, he had begun the slow, painful, unyielding work of ensuring that humanity would rise again. The first ember had been lit. The fire of retaliation, of resistance, would grow. Marcus had never believed in the phrase "knowledge is power" until the first time he saw them up close. The creatures, towering and relentless, moved with a precision that no human could match. Their skin shimmered with an unnatural hue, metallic yet organic, reflecting light like the surface of a river at dawn. Their eyes, if one could call them that, glowed faintly, cold and unfeeling, scanning every movement with ruthless calculation. He watched from the cover of a ruined wall, his heartbeat steady, his mind sharp. The band of survivors he had gathered moved quietly through the forest, relying on his guidance and instincts. Every day, Marcus sketched their forms, recorded their patterns, noted the sounds of their movements, the way their weapons, strange beams of energy, sliced through trees and stone alike. It was meticulous work, tedious and dangerous but necessary. Humanity would not endure by brute force alone. It would endure through understanding, through observation, and through cleverness. Ilara approached him one evening carrying a small satchel. "Marcus," she said softly, "Tom thinks it's pointless. He says we should focus on staying alive, not spying on them." Marcus looked at her, then at the fire they had built for warmth and morale. "Staying alive is important," he admitted, "but survival without knowledge is temporary. If we want to reclaim our world, we must learn. We must understand their weaknesses. Otherwise, every victory we imagine will crumble before our eyes." That night, Marcus set a watch over the outskirts of their hideout, listening to the distant hum of the alien forces. He noticed something strange. They always moved in patterns, predictable but not obvious. They avoided certain areas, their patrols synchronized as though following an unspoken command. Their energy weapons had a delay between shots, and their armor, while formidable, showed slight vulnerabilities at joints and underlayers. He began to teach the survivors what he had learned. Small exercises like moving silently between trees, understanding the sounds of alien movement, and improvising traps became part of their daily routine. Soren, the boy, excelled at observing patterns and predicting the creature's patrol routes. Ilara showed surprising ingenuity in crafting makeshift weapons and camouflage. Even Tom, initially skeptical, began to grasp that intelligence and planning could level the playing field against such overwhelming strength. As days turned into weeks, Marcus found another layer to study: their technology. He and a small team ventured cautiously to a downed alien device, hidden under a fallen structure. The object hummed with energy, its surface smooth and cool. Patterns etched like a circuit, yet alive, pulsating with light. Marcus traced the lines with his fingers, careful not to touch the energy core. There was logic here, alien and terrifying, yet logical. Patterns that humans could decipher, if only they persevered. That night, around the fire, Marcus shared his thoughts with the group. "They are advanced, yes, far beyond us in strength and speed, but they are not perfect. Every system, every machine, every strategy has flaws, and every flaw is a chance for us to strike back. To survive is not enough. We must learn, adapt, and use our minds. That is what makes us human. That is our true strength." The survivors listened, some with fear, some with awe. Marcus could see the spark growing, the same ember of defiance he carried burning in their hearts. It was fragile, yet unyielding. Knowledge was becoming their weapon, observation their shield, and strategy their hope. One evening, while Marcus studied a map of alien movements, Soren tugged at his sleeve. "Marcus, I think I see a pattern in their patrols. If we move here, we could gather supplies without being seen." Marcus knelt beside the boy, tracing the route. "Yes," he said, voice low and deliberate. "And one day, if we strike in the right place at the right time, we might force them to retreat. That day will come, but we must be patient. Every step we take is building toward it." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. The burden of survival, of knowledge, of leadership, it was relentless. But he had learned something in these weeks. The human mind, unyielding and creative, could match even the most formidable alien power. Humans were flawed, yes, fragile even. But their ingenuity, courage, and persistence were forces that could turn despair into victory. As the moon rose over the scarred valley, Marcus made a silent vow. He would study, he would plan, and he would teach. One day, the knowledge they gathered here in firelight and shadows would become the key to humanity's retaliation. The first attack had taken much, but it had left a greater gift in its wake. The understanding that humans were not just survivors, they were strategists, innovators, and fighters. And that knowledge, Marcus knew, would ignite the first flame of their final rebellion. The night was alive with tension, quiet but electric. As Marcus crouched in the shadow of the ruined windmill, the survivors he had gathered moved silently behind him, their breaths controlled, eyes sharp in the pale moonlight. For the first time since the attack, they were not merely hiding, they were preparing to strike. Weeks of observation, training, and careful planning had led to this moment. Marcus had studied the aliens' patrol routes, noted their weaknesses, and crafted a plan that relied not on brute strength, but on precision, cunning, and human ingenuity. Tonight, survival alone would not be enough. Tonight, humanity would answer back. Alara adjusted her makeshift sling, her hand steady despite the tension. "Are we ready?" she whispered. Her voice was calm, yet beneath it lay the undercurrent of fear that every human carried. Marcus nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We are ready. Remember, this is not about defeating them outright. It is about showing them, showing ourselves that we can fight, that we will fight." The survivors moved through the ruined village, stepping over scorched debris and fallen beams. Marcus led them to the edge of an alien encampment, a cluster of structures that hummed faintly with energy. Guards moved in predictable patterns exactly as Marcus had calculated. Timing was everything. A misstep, and the mission would end in disaster. Soren, the boy who had shown remarkable observational skills, pointed to a gap in the patrol. "Now," he whispered. Marcus gave the signal, and the group slipped through shadows like water, silent and determined. They reached a storage unit containing alien supplies, tools, energy cells, and strange equipment. Marcus motioned to Tom, who had a knack for dismantling things. Within minutes, Tom had rigged a simple but effective trap that could disrupt the alien's power source temporarily. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The trap was set. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. Every heartbeat echoed in the silence, every sound amplified in the tension of the night. The first signal was given, and the trap activated. A pulse of energy flickered across the alien structure, cutting off lights and sending the guards into confusion. Chaos erupted, but the survivors moved with precision. They retrieved supplies, sabotaged equipment, and disappeared into the shadows before the aliens could fully respond. Not one life was lost, not one misstep made. For the first time, Marcus saw it, the spark he had cultivated in the survivors now blazing into a flame. Humans could fight. Humans could outthink the invaders. As they retreated to their hidden camp, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had struck back, and in doing so, they had claimed something the aliens could not take: pride, confidence, and the knowledge that humanity could resist. But the victory was bittersweet. They had seen the aliens' strength firsthand, and Marcus knew the creatures would adapt. The first retaliation would provoke a response, and when it came, it would be merciless. Yet in that moment, Marcus understood something fundamental. Fear could be used, shaped, and transformed into courage. Humanity had begun to fight not because they were unafraid, but because they refused to be dominated by fear. Alara approached him, her eyes glinting in the firelight. "We did it," she said softly, almost in disbelief. "We really did it." Marcus smiled, though it was tempered with the weight of what lay ahead. "We did," he replied. "But remember, this is only the beginning. Every action we take, every step forward, will be harder. The road to reclaiming our world is long, and it will demand everything we have." That night, around the fire, Marcus taught another lesson. He spoke of strategy, of patience, of learning from mistakes, and of preparation. "The first retaliation shows us what is possible," he said, voice firm, carrying over the crackle of flames. "But possibility is not enough. To survive, to win, we must endure, adapt, and fight with all our minds and hearts. We have proven we can strike back. Now we must prepare to strike harder, smarter, and together." In the darkness beyond their camp, the aliens stirred. Marcus knew they would hunt for the intruders. They would adapt, and they would strike with greater force. Yet he felt no fear. The humans around him, once fragile and uncertain, were beginning to embody the essence of resilience. They were not pawns in a story written by alien invaders. They were the authors of their own fate. As dawn approached, painting the ruined valley in shades of gold and gray, Marcus looked at his small band of survivors. Each face reflected exhaustion, determination, and a spark of defiance that no alien force could extinguish. They had taken the first step, fragile but decisive, toward reclaiming what had been stolen. The first retaliation was a whisper of hope, a signal to the universe that humanity had not surrendered. Marcus knew that the road ahead would demand sacrifice, courage, and cunning. But for the first time since the sky had fallen, he believed that humanity could rise again, not as victims, but as warriors, strategists, and survivors. And in that belief, the fire of retaliation burned brighter, promising that the final battle had not yet been fought, but its outcome would belong to humanity. The valley had begun to breathe with quiet resilience, a fragile pulse of life amidst the ruins. Marcus watched the survivors move through the forest, gathering supplies and training in silence, their steps precise, their eyes vigilant. The first retaliation had brought hope, but hope, Marcus knew, was a dangerous companion. It could inspire courage, or blind humans to the shadows that lingered within their own hearts. It was Tom who first raised the doubt. Once a pillar of strength and pragmatism, the burly farmer had grown restless. "We can't keep hiding, Marcus," he muttered one night around the fire. "We strike, yes, but we're wasting time preparing while they grow stronger. We should move now or we'll never have another chance." Marcus nodded, understanding the frustration. "Patience is our weapon as much as courage," he replied gently. "We strike too soon, we risk everything we've built. Strategy wins wars, Tom, not brute force." Yet Tom's gaze lingered, a spark of something unspoken. Fear, frustration, maybe even envy. Marcus ignored it, pressing forward with training, planning, and gathering intelligence. But in the quiet hours, he began to notice subtle cracks, missing supplies, whispered conversations, and glances filled with uncertainty. Trust, he realized, was the most fragile weapon humans possessed. The betrayal struck without warning. One night, as Marcus slept fitfully in the hidden camp, a flare lit the sky. The aliens had found them. Chaos erupted. Tom, the one who had sown doubt, led a group into a reckless charge, leaving the defenses incomplete. Survivors were scattered, forced to run or fight in desperation. Marcus sprinted through smoke and fire, pulling Alara and Soren to safety, his heart pounding with a mixture of rage, fear, and heartbreak. By dawn, the damage was clear. The camp lay in ruins, supplies destroyed, and several survivors, friends, allies, those who had trusted him, were gone. Marcus stood among the ashes, silent, every nerve screaming, every emotion raw. The betrayal cut deeper than any alien strike could. Tom had acted out of fear, yes, but fear had become a weapon against them. Alara knelt beside him, hands trembling as she picked through the remains. "Marcus, what do we do now?" she whispered. Her voice was fragile, yet beneath it burned a stubborn flame. Marcus inhaled, feeling the weight of responsibility press on his chest like a boulder. He had lost much, too much, but humanity was not finished. "Not yet, we rebuild," he said, voice steady despite the storm within. "We learn from our mistakes, and we continue. Betrayal does not end us, our response to it does. Every life we save, every lesson we carry forward, is another step toward reclaiming our world." The survivors gathered, their eyes haunted, their bodies weary. Yet Marcus saw something extraordinary, even in loss. In grief, in the shadow of treachery, hope endured. Humans were fragile, yes, vulnerable and flawed, but those flaws did not define them. Their resilience did. For weeks, Marcus led the survivors in cautious recovery. They salvaged what they could, trained more carefully, and rebuilt their hidden network. Tom, confronted with his recklessness, was cast out, not out of vengeance but necessity. Marcus knew that every leader must make impossible decisions for the sake of the many. Humanity's survival depended on discipline, unity, and the refusal to be broken by internal strife. During one quiet night, Marcus spoke to the remaining group. "Loss will follow us, yes," he said, voice carrying over the crackle of fire. "Betrayal may strike us and fear may tempt us to despair. But we are human. We endure, we adapt, we fight. And every scar we bear, every tear we shed is proof that we refuse to be defeated. This pain will forge us into something stronger, something capable of reclaiming our world." Alara rested her hand on his arm, a silent promise of loyalty. Soren, watching the stars, whispered softly, "We'll be okay, won't we, Marcus?" Marcus looked down at him, eyes filled with both sorrow and determination. "Yes, Soren, we will be okay. We will rise. And one day, we will write the ending to this story ourselves, not in fear, not in ashes, but in fire and victory." That night, Marcus stood alone at the edge of the ruined valley, watching the horizon. The aliens would return. They were relentless, efficient, merciless. But humans, Marcus realized, possessed something they could never understand: the capacity for hope, for ingenuity, and for courage that transcended fear. Betrayal and loss had tested them, yet they endured. That endurance, he knew, was the seed of retaliation. As the first embers of dawn painted the scarred landscape, Marcus clenched his fists. Humanity had been shaken but not broken. They had been betrayed but not defeated. And from the ashes of loss, the fire of resolve burned brighter than ever. The Empire believed they had crushed humanity's spirit. They were wrong. The wind swept across the valley like a messenger, carrying with it the scent of smoke, ash, and determination. Marcus stood atop a ridge, his gaze sweeping the scattered remnants of human settlements below. Each cluster of survivors, once isolated and fearful, had slowly begun to respond to his call. Word had spread of the first retaliation, of humans daring to strike back at the invaders. That spark of defiance had ignited hope, and now, that hope was coalescing into something greater. An army, not of soldiers, but of survivors, thinkers, and fighters who refused to bow to fear. Ilara joined him, her cloak flapping in the wind. "Marcus, they're coming," she said, nodding to the trail of humans moving toward the ridge. Families, warriors, even those who had once hidden in caves now walked with purpose, drawn by the promise of leadership, the belief that humanity could fight back. Marcus's chest swelled with a mix of pride and responsibility. Each person here carried loss, pain, and fear, but also courage, ingenuity, and determination. This was the true strength of humanity, not brute power, but resilience, creativity, and an unyielding will to survive. He turned to address the growing assembly. "Listen to me," he said, voice ringing clear over the murmurs of the crowd. "We have survived the first attack, endured betrayal and loss, and learned the ways of our enemy. They are strong, yes, but not invincible. Their power is precision, their strength is speed, but we have something they cannot match: courage, ingenuity, and unity. We will fight as one, and we will show them that humanity cannot be crushed." The crowd responded with a chorus of murmurs that grew into cheers, the sound of resolve echoing across the valley. Marcus felt the weight of leadership pressing on him, yet he welcomed it. Every life before him was a story of survival, every voice a thread woven into the tapestry of resistance. Together they would face the coming storm. Plans were made with meticulous care. Scouts mapped alien patrols, engineers, both trained and improvised, prepared traps and diversion tactics, and strategists, inspired by Marcus's teachings, proposed coordinated strikes designed to exploit the invaders' weaknesses. Every human in the gathering contributed, each role vital, each skill a weapon. Soren, now older in mind if not in years, approached Marcus, holding a map marked with potential ambush points. "If we lure them here," he said, pointing to a narrow canyon, "we can trap their units and slow their advance. We'll need precise timing. And courage." Marcus nodded, pride warming him. "You've learned well, Soren. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. And today we will act." Over the following days, the scattered survivors converged, forming an organized network. Signals were established, supply lines secured, and defenses constructed along strategic choke points. Each night, around fires and makeshift tents, Marcus spoke to them not just as a leader but as a mentor, a symbol of human tenacity. "The Empire believes they have already claimed victory," he said one evening, staring at the stars. "They are wrong. Every step we take, every plan we make, every moment we endure, they are the proof that humanity writes its own story, even in flames." The gathering storm was more than a collection of people. It was a force of human will, sharpened by loss and honed by survival. Families who had once fled in terror now stood shoulder to shoulder with hunters, farmers, and thinkers. They, trained, studied, and prepared, not for revenge but for the restoration of a world stolen from them. Marcus knew the aliens would respond with overwhelming force. Their precision, their technology, their relentless nature were formidable. But humans had something equally formidable: unpredictability, creativity, and an unbreakable spirit. The coming battle would test every ounce of courage, every lesson learned, and every bond forged through hardship. On the eve of confrontation, Marcus walked along the edge of the camp, watching fires flicker against the darkening sky. Ilara joined him, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "Do you think we can win?" she asked softly. Marcus looked at the horizon. where the first hints of alien patrols moved like shadows across the land. "We will win," he said firmly. "Not because we are stronger, but because we refuse to be defeated. They believe they are the end of our story, but they are only a chapter. Humanity will write the ending, and it will be ours." As the first stars appeared in the twilight, Marcus clenched his fists. The storm was coming, the battle imminent, and the Empire would soon learn that the spirit of humanity could not be extinguished. The survivors around him were ready, and so was he. The fire that had begun as a spark in a ruined valley now blazed in the hearts of every human who dared to stand. The final confrontation was approaching. Marcus had survived the first attack. He had endured betrayal and loss. Now he would lead humanity into the storm, and this time, they would not merely survive. They would reclaim their world. The Empire claimed victory. Humanity was about to write a new ending in flames. The dawn broke over the scarred valley like the edge of a blade, pale light spilling across ruins and forests alike. Marcus stood atop the ridge, the weight of leadership pressing heavily on his shoulders, yet his gaze was steady. Below him, the army of survivors, farmers, scholars, hunters, children who had grown too quickly, waited silently, hearts beating in unison. They were not trained soldiers, yet they were warriors of something far greater, humanity itself. The aliens moved across the landscape, their towering forms shimmering in the early light, their precision perfect, their confidence absolute. They had believed humanity broken, scattered, and incapable of resistance. They had claimed victory before the final battle even began. They had underestimated the one thing they could never measure: human will. Marcus turned to his people, the faces of those who had endured loss, betrayal, and despair reflected in the morning light. Ilara stood beside him, Soren gripping her hand, both of them as determined as he had ever seen. Marcus raised his voice firm and commanding, yet filled with emotion. "Today we reclaim our world," he said, every word ringing across the valley. "They believe victory is theirs. They believe we are weak. But they are wrong. Every scar we carry, every loss we mourned, every lesson we learned has brought us to this moment. Today, we fight not only to survive but to endure, to remind the universe what it means to be human." A murmur spread through the survivors, growing into a roar that echoed over the valleys and ridges. Marcus felt the surge of energy, the unyielding defiance of a species that had endured impossible odds. Fear still lingered, yes, but it was tempered by courage, the courage born of loss, of struggle, and of unwavering determination. The battle began with a strategy that Marcus had honed for weeks. Traps rigged along choke points exploded in bursts of fire and energy, slowing the aliens' advance. Diversions drew them into terrain that humans knew intimately. Forests dense with undergrowth, ravines where the alien size became a liability. Each movement was precise, coordinated, and terrifyingly effective. Soren led a small team, setting snares and alarms to cut off alien patrols, while Ilara commanded another unit, using the ingenuity they had cultivated to disorient and confuse their enemy. Marcus himself moved with the front line, coordinating strikes, inspiring courage, and making decisions that would turn the tide of the battle. The aliens fought with brutality, but the humans were relentless. Each strike carried purpose. Each maneuver reflected careful study of the enemy's weaknesses. Marcus watched as humans used ingenuity where technology failed, intuition where strategy faltered. They were imperfect, yet extraordinary. They adapted, learned, and endured, turning desperation into opportunity. Hours passed, and the valley became a theater of fire, shadow, and defiance. The aliens' advance faltered, then broke, as human ingenuity and courage reshaped the battlefield. Marcus felt the energy of his people, a force more powerful than any weapon, more formidable than any armor. Every victory, no matter how small, fueled the collective spirit, and soon the creatures began to retreat, their confidence shattered. When the smoke cleared, the valley was quiet. Survivors gathered amidst the ruins, exhausted but unbroken. Marcus stood at the center, watching the horizon where the last of the invaders disappeared. Humanity had endured, had adapted, and had triumphed, not through sheer strength but through resilience, intelligence, and unbreakable spirit. Alara approached him, her face streaked with soot and sweat, eyes shining with tears of relief and pride. "We did it," she whispered. Marcus nodded, his chest heavy with the weight of what had been lost and what had been won. "Yes," he said softly. "We survived, and now we begin again." Soren ran to them, laughter breaking through exhaustion. "We won," he shouted, voice carrying across the valley. Marcus smiled, allowing himself a rare moment of unguarded joy. Humanity had survived the unthinkable. Humanity had faced annihilation and emerged victorious. That night, around the flickering fires of the valley, Marcus spoke to his people once more. "The Empire claimed victory," he said, voice calm but resolute. "But we have written a new ending, in flames of courage, in sparks of ingenuity, and in the hearts of every human who refused to surrender. This is our world, this is our story, and no force in the universe can take it from us." The survivors cheered, voices rising in a chorus of triumph that echoed across the valleys. Marcus looked to the stars above, remembering those lost, those betrayed, those who had endured with him. They had survived the first attack, endured the weight of betrayal and loss, and now together they had forged a future. Humanity had been tested, and humanity had prevailed. The invaders had underestimated them, as the universe so often did. But humans were never just creatures of flesh and bone. They were spirit, will, courage, and resilience. They were creators, thinkers, fighters, survivors. And now, they had reclaimed their world. Marcus closed his eyes, letting the roar of victory wash over him. The first attack had been survived. The retaliation had been led. And in the flames of the final battle, humanity had written its own ending. An ending not of fear, not of subjugation, but of triumph. The Empire believed it had claimed victory. Humanity had proved it wrong, and the valley, once silent and broken, now pulsed with life, hope, and the enduring spirit of mankind.